Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for clicking on this video. This is Vlog-A-Day number 22. It is Friday, February 9th, 2024. Yesterday I talked about why I moved to Germany, gave a little brief overview of my chronology, what got me here. Today I want to talk about some things that people don't tell you about before you move to a new country. There are so many creators out there, myself included, that will paint this picture about living in a foreign country, that will perhaps not show you the negative things or the difficult things about living in a new country. I personally would like to think I do show you some of those things, and I think with this daily vlog, I hope you get the idea that I don't live an adventure, right? This is just regular life. I go to school, I go to the store, occasionally I get to see some cool things. I am not one of these YouTubers that travels year round and makes money off of Instagram photos and all of these things. So that's not me either. I'm sure that life is attainable, but it isn't my life. I want to talk about a few things that they don't tell you about that you probably should know about before you decide to move to a new country. Now, the first thing is people don't talk about how when you move to a new country, you're not going to have any friends. You're not going to have that support system from the place you came from. If you move, say, from Dallas to Houston, you're probably not going to have any friends either. But you're going to be in the same culture. You're going to speak the same language as the people around you. You may go to the same type of church, or you may, with your job, you may, run across some of the same people. If you move to a new country, you're starting over. Unless you work for a company that is kind of small but has offices overseas and you've worked with people before, chances are you're not going to know anyone here. So keep that in mind, that when you get to a new country, you're not going to know anybody. And it is awfully hard to make friends in a foreign country speaking a different language. Now, if you're outgoing and, you're one of these extroverts that always makes friends wherever they go, then you're probably not going to have a problem. There are plenty of Americans that live here. There are plenty of Canadians, plenty of people that speak English, that you don't have to be alone. But just know that when you move to Germany, the stereotype about Germans being cold, I don't find to be extremely accurate. But what I will say is sometimes it's difficult to make friends with them. For one thing, if you don't speak German, if they're under 40 years old, they're probably going to speak English. But even still, if they have a group of friends that speak German, that they're all are in German, they're German people, they speak German, in their everyday lives, it might be awkward for them to just suddenly have to speak English all the time to you. And when it comes to making friends, people kind of want it the easy way. You kind of don't want to have to work so hard to be a friend with somebody. So there isn't a whole lot of incentive for people to go out of their way for you when they already have a friend base built. That's not to say that Germans wouldn't. That's not to say that German people are unfriendly. They certainly are friendly. Just keep that in mind. Now, that is not saying you won't make friends with Germans. Germans are a little bit slower to become friendly with you, but it is possible to make friends. Don't come thinking you're not going to make friends either, because you will make friends. It cuts both ways with this. You're not going to know anyone, but you can make friends. It is not impossible to make friends. With this not knowing anyone, though, comes loneliness. This can be a lonely life, guys. You're isolated socially. You're isolated from wherever you go. Think about it. If you don't speak the language, whether it's German, Japanese, whatever, Russian, wherever you go, French, if you move to a new country, you don't speak the language, you are completely isolated in public. You may be able to read signs, there may be a lot of English signs around, but you hear people talking, you're not going to be able to understand them. And that simple thing is something that I had a hard time with when I first got here. I didn't think about. Like, if you go to the store in the US and you're just walking around, you hear conversations all the time, right? You hear all of these conversations. They're speaking English, you understand what's going on. You may not be paying attention, but at least you have this connection with other people. When you move to a country where you don't speak the language, you don't have that connection. So you're completely in a boat in the middle of the ocean without any oars. So my suggestion and what I'm trying to do is learn the language better. That's another thing that I want to talk about that people don't tell you is the advice they always give, the advice I give is, well, learn the language. Well, okay, sure, I will learn the language. I got it. I'll learn the language. It doesn't come all at once. It doesn't come in a year. It doesn't come in 2 years. It takes a long time to learn a language to where you can be fluent enough to have conversations and not just have conversations, shallow conversation, but have comprehension. I always say, if you can understand comedy in a foreign language, you're fluent. So until you can understand jokes, until you can understand when someone is teasing, I think you're not gonna fully grasp a culture until you get to that level. Being in an ocean without oars can be very uncomfortable. And you have to kind of embrace this uncomfortableness and sort of use it to motivate you to, to adapt to the country, to learn the language, to learn the rules of the road, to learn the cultural mores, to learn the things that are gonna allow you to get by. Personally, I find that for me, as a white male, it's a lot easier for me to pass than maybe somebody who doesn't look like me. So I can't give advice for people who don't look like me in blending in. But for me, I can blend in by not opening my mouth. The minute I open my mouth, even to speak German, they know. And that can be uncomfortable, but embrace it. Differences are fine. Differences are good. And most people, at least here, most people will not give you hassle for that. I cannot speak for race, okay? I do not want to speak for race. I don't want to speak for anyone else's lived experiences because I can't tell you, oh, there's no racism here, because that's not my lived experience. Somebody else who doesn't look like me will have to give advice on that. But embrace this uncomfortableness, because it is uncomfortable, especially like the first 2 or 3 months living in a foreign country. I will say the one thing about moving to a foreign country when you're in the military is, at least when you're in the military, you have a safety net. You have the American base, which is a little piece of America. You don't have to leave base if you don't want to. I know people who did that, who never left base. But even if you venture out into what we call the economy, if you venture out into the countryside, when you move here and you're not in the military, you're on your own. There is not anyone there to help you and to pick you up if you fall. You just have to learn your lessons on your own. And that can be scary, but it also can be exhilarating. Just depends on how you approach it. And there will be times when you just want to give up and go home. I have experienced this myself. It happens. Sometimes you just want to give up. It would be so much easier just to go home. I experienced this in December when I got COVID, and all I could think about was going home. I didn't want to do this anymore. I wanted to give up. I wanted to go home. Now, I was sick, and that always, being sick certainly doesn't help with these things. You're a lot more susceptible to your inner demons when you're not up to 100% to fight them. So bear this in mind. There are going to be these times when you are just going to want to go home, and you have to determine. You have to do what's best for you. Sometimes it's best to go home. Sometimes it's best to go for a visit. Sometimes it's best to call your parents, whatever. Just, whatever it is that you decide to do. I will not say don't give up, because I don't like that. Sometimes you have to give up and move on to the next better thing. But just know that probably around the 3 or 4, 5 month point that you feel like you want to give up and go home, that's completely normal. There's nothing abnormal about how you're feeling. Okay? Those of us who have been there have gotten through it, so just know you're not alone. If you're feeling those things, if you're feeling like you want to give up and go home, it'll get better. Those feelings are not permanent. But also listen to your body, listen to your heart, and talk to other people. If you're feeling this way, talk to your parents, talk to friends at home, whatever, and judge for yourself how you really feel. Now, one more thing I want to talk about, a little more lighthearted, is one one thing they don't tell you about when you are moving is just how different Europeans' sense of distance is to the US. You know, this is not a serious topic, but I think it's funny because I just saw this on TikTok. There was a video about somebody saying something was like 2 hours away from London and how far that was. Guys, the US is so big. Like for me, driving from Dallas to Houston, which is like, I don't know, 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, no big deal. I used to do that like 2 or 3 times a month. But for Europeans, driving 2 hours is so far. I have my friend who lives in Austria, from where she lives to going to, say, Salzburg. Oh, it's so far. It's like an hour. You know, I would drive an hour and a half to get to work every day for a year when I lived in the US. So just that can be a pleasant surprise for you when you come here. Just realize when you come here, your sense of distance is going to be way different than a lot of the European sense of distance. These are just a few things I've thought of off the top of my head. If you live overseas, let me know in the comments, what are some things that you wish you had known before you moved overseas? If you're moving overseas, what are some things you want to know? Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't done so. I hope you guys have a great evening, and I will see you tomorrow.